On the morning of October 30, 2011, the white 2004 Nissan Murano belonging to 44-year-old Karen Swift was found abandoned along a rural stretch of highway just outside Dyersburg, Tennessee. A mother of four, Karen had last been seen the night before at her home after tucking her 9-year-old daughter into bed. By morning, she was gone. Despite early suspicions that foul play was involved, Dyer County investigators found themselves with few solid leads. There were no witnesses, no helpful cell phone data, no DNA evidence, and the person they suspected most appeared physically incapable of committing a murder. Hi, I'm Kevin, and welcome to Just Thought Lounge. In today's case, we're traveling back more than a decade to rural Tennessee, where a beloved mother of four vanished overnight. 4 years, her story remained unresolved, but now, in 2024, we're finally learning what investigators believe happened to Karen Swift. Let's begin. When Karen's daughters woke up on the morning of October 30th, their mother was nowhere to be found. The night before, Karen had picked up 9-year-old Ashley from a Halloween sleepover after the girl called, saying she wasn't feeling well. Karen herself had been out at a Halloween party at a friend's house and hadn't planned to return home that night. But she did, bringing Ashley back and reportedly crawling into bed with her sometime after 2 a.m. Also at home that night was Karen's husband, David Swift, who was upstairs with their younger daughter, Key. By morning, Ashley found herself in a different room, downstairs with Key, without memory of being moved. Their mother was gone, and so was her vehicle. By 3 p.m. that day, 2 calls were made to the Dyer County Sheriff's Office. One was from David Swift, who, after trying unsuccessfully to reach Karen's friends, called to report her missing. The second came from 2 of those same concerned friends, Bill and Kathy Bonas. They had seen Karen's Nissan abandoned on Millsfield Highway, just a quarter mile from the Swift home. The SUV had a flat tire. Deputy Alexander arrived at the scene, followed shortly by Sergeant Walker. David Swift was already there. He had unlocked the vehicle and searched for Karen's belongings, but her purse, keys, and phone were all missing. A single rusty screw was found embedded in the tire, suggesting she'd driven over it just right to cause a puncture. There were no signs of struggle or blood. Later forensic analysis by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI, found no helpful evidence in the SUV. But Deputy Alexander noticed something odd. At 6 feet 2 inches, he didn't need to adjust the seat to drive the car. At just 5 feet 5 inches, Karen likely would have moved the seat forward to reach the pedals, raising doubts about whether she was the last person to drive it. A full-scale search began, starting at the site of the abandoned vehicle and radiating into the surrounding rural area. A pair of jeans and a top, later confirmed to be Karen's, were found not far from the car. Her Halloween costume from the party remained in the SUV. The car had been left just minutes from home. From David, investigators learned that Karen had returned home around 2 a.m. with Ashley. He said that was the last time he saw her. There had been no confirmed sightings of Karen since. Police also discovered that Karen had filed for divorce from David just 3 weeks earlier. The couple had chosen to keep living together for the sake of their children. The Swifts had a complicated history. They were first married in 1989 and had 2 sons, Preston and Dustin. But by 1996, their marriage hit turbulence. David began an affair with a co-worker that lasted 3 years and resulted in a child. Karen found out when the baby was born and filed for divorce, which was finalized in 2000. Not long after, the two began reconciling and remarried on the anniversary of their original wedding in September 2000. They had 2 more children, Ashley and Key. Eventually, the roles reversed. Karen began her own affair. David, hoping for a fresh start, quit his job, accepted a new one in Dyersburg, Tennessee, and abruptly moved the family there, without Karen's prior involvement. The decision was so rushed that their eldest son Preston was left behind to finish the school year. Karen didn't even see the new house until she was unloading boxes into it. Still, she adapted quickly to life in rural Tennessee. Despite David's alleged reluctance for her to work, Karen found ways to earn money, cleaning homes, landscaping, and teaching aerobics. Known as outgoing and cheerful, she quickly made friends. Many described her as selfless to a fault, someone who always prioritized others' needs over her own, even when she needed support. But her second attempt at marriage was unraveling again. She confided in friends that David's behavior had made her feel unsafe. Despite reports of stalking and confrontations while she was out with friends, Karen downplayed it, saying he could be unpredictable, but she was probably overreacting. After Karen's disappearance, those closest to her consistently described her as a devoted mother. "We want her to come home. Her family needs her. Her kids need her. She's a wonderful mother, very strong. And I know if she's out there, she'll find her way home." After reporting Karen missing, David gave a statement to police. He arrived on crutches, explaining that a knee injury from earlier in the year had flared up again recently. "It was Easter morning," David told detectives. "I had to have surgery, tore a quad tendon at my daughter's soccer game. Just last week, it started acting up again." As police took down his information, David shared a new detail. Karen had been using a second, secret cell phone. He said this phone had been provided to her by Bill Bonas, the husband of her close friend Kathy. David said he had no idea what the number was. "That's the one I've known about, on the Verizon account I pay for," he said. "But I just found out that Bill and Kathy gave her another phone." From that revelation, David began describing Karen as increasingly secretive, portraying her as a partier and heavy drinker. He also suggested there was something inappropriate going on between her and the Bonas. "We've heard it a few times. If you want to know what's going on, look in my backyard." David continued telling detectives stories of what he called Karen's erratic behavior, which he said began not long after their move to Dyer County. As investigators pressed David Swift for details about the night his wife disappeared, his focus veered repeatedly toward her social circle, specifically her new friends Bill and Kathy Bonas. He claimed they had a negative influence on Karen, recalling that she spent an increasing amount of time at their home, often without explanation. David described incidents that painted an unsettling picture. He said he once found Karen undressed in the Bonas backyard hot tub. On another occasion, he claimed to have discovered her naked in bed with Kathy Bonas. "She was over there all the time," he said. "She started sneaking out of the house to be with Kathy and Bill. I walked in one night and found Karen in bed with Kathy." Kathy Bonas, who held a master's degree in psychology and ran a dance studio, became a central figure in David's version of events. He suggested she had manipulated Karen's thinking and habits. He accused Karen of heavy drinking and erratic behavior, stating she was once so intoxicated that she passed out on the porch in front of their children. At this point, detectives grew visibly frustrated with David's unprompted, often accusatory monologue about his wife's lifestyle. They attempted to steer the conversation back to the morning of October 30th. They asked if there had been any argument when Karen returned home with Ashley that night. "No argument," David said. "I just made sure Ashley was okay. I asked Karen if she should be driving. That was it." When asked whether he thought Karen had been drinking, David said yes, adding that he could always tell when she had been. David claimed he went back upstairs to bed shortly after Karen and Ashley returned, and that he didn't see or hear anything unusual until waking up around 9:30 or 10 o'clock the next morning. But if Karen left the house in the early morning hours, where could she have gone? When detectives asked what he thought had happened to his wife, David again pointed to Kathy Bonas. He said that she had told him Karen's phone had pinged near the Mississippi River, and he suspected that Kathy was withholding the truth. "If she knows that, then that's where my mind goes," he told him. "Why would she be putting the girls, through this?" Still, David said he just wanted Karen to come home and resume being a mother, even if she no longer wanted to be his wife. Before leaving the station, David agreed to let police search the Swift home. The walkthrough of the house revealed no immediate signs of foul play. Karen's downstairs bedroom was a bit untidy, but nothing indicated violence. It looked like the lived-in clutter typical of a household with young children. One odd discovery did stand out: 7 gallons of bleach, which had been stored on the property. David explained the bleach was used to clean up after a recent incident involving their dogs. A neighbor, John Hogshooter, had been arrested on the very day Karen disappeared. He was charged with animal cruelty for allegedly poisoning dogs in the neighborhood, including the Swifts. Hogshooter later said it was accidental, claiming he had left fly poison out due to an infestation around building materials. Karen reportedly did not believe it was an accident and had been upset. Though suspicious, the bleach was not collected as evidence. Still, investigators began to consider Hogshooter a possible person of interest in Karen's disappearance. Also found during the search were divorce papers Karen had served to David. They were oddly tucked under a tire in the back of his vehicle. As days passed with no further signs of Karen, David was called back for a second interview. By then, his story had changed multiple times. Initially, he said he didn't see Karen at all that night, only heard her from the top of the stairs. Then he said he saw her but couldn't remember what she was wearing. Eventually, he claimed to have seen her clearly in the kitchen, describing her clothing as ripped blue jeans and a gray coat. Detectives noted these inconsistencies, but still lacked hard evidence. Meanwhile, the search for Karen continued. On November 4, 2011, authorities concluded their sixth straight day of searching. It would take many more weeks before a major breakthrough occurred. In a major development, Trooper Jason Page discovered 2 cell phones in a wooded area just 500 feet from the Swift home, off Harness Road. This was between the family house and where Karen's car had been found. The phones, Karen's Verizon phone and a second, secret device known as a Voyager, had been discarded roughly 145 feet from the roadside. The data from the phones was revealing. Karen's main phone had connected to a cellular signal extender installed in the Swift home at 2 a.m. on October 30th, right after she returned with Ashley. It disconnected from the extender at 4:38 a.m., and by 5:09, the device went completely offline. When it was found, it appeared to have been crushed, likely smashed on the road. Karen's vehicle was spotted just 6 minutes later, at 5:15 a.m. More puzzling was the behavior of the Voyager phone. That device had connected to the home extender 5 hours later, at 9:55 a.m., long after Karen had supposedly left the house. A single call was made from the Voyager to check voicemail before it, too, was discarded in the same wooded area. The Bonas told investigators they gave Karen the secret phone to allow her to contact her divorce attorney without David's knowledge. They described David as controlling and manipulative. In addition to the phone, they had helped Karen financially by covering her legal fees. On December 10, 2011, local preacher John Robinson and his friend Mark Rickman were leaving the Bledsoe Cemetery when they made a grim discovery under a patch of kudzu vines, human remains. The cemetery was just under 3 miles from the Swift home. An autopsy later confirmed the worst. After 6 weeks of searching, the remains were identified as Karen Swift. She was found mostly unclothed, her undergarments pulled down below her knees, likely as a result of her body being dragged across the gravel path to where it was hidden. The medical examiner concluded this was not the location where she had died. Karen had suffered blunt force trauma to the head. The injury would have been fatal if inflicted while she was still alive. The object used was heavy and blunt, and the wound was consistent with her being struck while positioned against a hard surface. No murder weapon was ever found, but the case was officially reclassified from a missing person to a homicide. David Swift remained the primary suspect. He didn't really react the way you'd expect someone to after hearing their loved one had been found dead, one investigator would later say. I'm not even sure he asked for details. Despite increasing suspicion, David Swift continued to elude any formal charges. Investigators noted that his behavior remained distant and unemotional. He never joined the public efforts to search for his wife and, according to detectives, showed an oddly muted response when told her body had been found. He didn't call her by name. He didn't cry. It just wasn't the right response, one investigator later said. He has never once assisted us in searching for her. However, suspicion alone was not enough to build a case. There was no physical evidence in the Swift home, on their property, or in their vehicles that indicated where a fatal attack might have occurred. Forensic analysis failed to find traces of blood or struggle, and Karen had no defensive wounds or foreign DNA under her fingernails. And then there was David's knee. In April 2011, 6 months before Karen's disappearance, David had suffered a serious knee injury that required surgery. According to co-workers, the injury continued to affect him significantly. One co-worker recalled seeing David collapse just days before Karen vanished, unable to support his weight. He had been relying on crutches to get around in the days before and after her death. This posed a difficult contradiction for investigators. How could a man with such limited mobility commit a murder that required dragging a body, disposing of it, staging a scene, and then walking home? Some began to believe David Swift might truly be innocent. If he didn't do it, one investigator admitted, what he's gone through is unimaginable. He lost his wife and has lived under a cloud of suspicion ever since. Despite the doubts, investigators continued to examine the people closest to the case. Alongside David Swift, police scrutinized the Bonas and their relationship with Karen. They revisited the poisoning of neighborhood pets, including the Swift's dog, and took a closer look at neighbor John Hogshooter, who had been charged with animal cruelty the very day Karen disappeared. There were lingering questions. The Bonas house, for example, had been the site of Kathy's 40th birthday party, an event that allegedly involved multiple guests, including Karen, undressing in the hot tub. Though potentially unrelated, it suggested a pattern of behavior that could have provoked jealousy or rage in David, who had previously accused his wife of infidelity. Karen's son, Dustin, also shared a strange encounter from shortly before her body was found. He recalled seeing a man with a metal detector near the Bledsoe Cemetery. When questioned, the man claimed to be exercising and then said he was looking for his wife's watch, even though he already had a watch on his wrist. The man was never identified. With little physical evidence and a growing list of odd but unprovable stories, speculation filled the void. Years passed. Leads dried up. David Swift eventually left Dyersburg. He remarried and relocated to Jefferson County, Alabama. But in Tennessee, public pressure to charge someone for Karen's murder never truly faded. Investigators, including lead detective Terry McCre, continued to re-examine the evidence, hoping to build a theory that could explain everything and point to a suspect. That theory eventually came together, and at the center of it was David Swift. According to investigators, David had grown increasingly enraged over Karen's decision to file for divorce. They believed he had been attempting to maintain control over her life and may have begun planning her murder in the days leading up to October 30th. The first part of that plan, they claimed, was faking the rain jury of his knee in front of co-workers to establish the illusion of physical incapacity. On the night of October 29th, David made a final attempt to reconcile with Karen by asking her to dinner. She declined, opting instead to attend a Halloween party with the Bonas, further deepening David's resentment. Investigators speculated that Karen was attacked while she slept. She had gone to bed with her 9-year-old daughter Ashley. To avoid waking her, David likely moved Ashley and their younger daughter Keely into the other room before carrying out the attack. They believed Karen had been strangled, then dragged to the garage where she was struck in the head with a heavy object. The lack of visible defensive wounds supported the idea that she had been unconscious or already dead when the blow was delivered. Once Karen was dead, investigators believed David placed her in either his own vehicle or hers and drove the 3 miles to Bledsoe Cemetery. There, he pulled her body into the kudzu vines. To stage the scene, David then drove Karen's vehicle a short distance down the road, just far enough to make it look like she had driven off and gotten a flat tire. Investigators believed he used a rusty screw to puncture the tire, one found protruding from the rubber when police discovered the vehicle. Karen's main phone disconnected from the home signal extender at 4:38 a.m. and was off the network by 5:09. Her vehicle was found shortly thereafter, at 5:15. Detectives speculated that David walked home after abandoning the SUV. Along the way, he discarded Karen's Verizon phone in a nearby wooded area. But Karen's secret phone, the Voyager, remained in the house. Investigators believed David searched for it in her bedroom, possibly causing the messiness that deputies had previously dismissed as typical clutter. Around 9:55 a.m., that phone briefly connected to the signal extender in the house, and a voicemail was accessed. Afterward, David reportedly took the Voyager and discarded it near the same wooded area where he had dropped the other phone. Investigators then believed he returned home, cleaned the garage using the bleach found on the property, and began calling Karen's friends, pretending to be concerned about her disappearance. In July 2023, almost 12 years after Karen Swift was killed, David Swift was arrested in Alabama following a grand jury indictment for first-degree murder. He was extradited to Tennessee to stand trial. Authorities remained tight-lipped about what finally convinced prosecutors to act. There was no new forensic evidence, no additional DNA, no breakthrough witnesses. What changed? What was the piece that made it all come together? A reporter asked. "I can't talk about specifics of the case," came the reply from the district attorney. Trial, the prosecution leaned heavily on circumstantial evidence. Friends of Karen testified that David had become increasingly possessive and controlling in the months leading up to her death. "Tell me about the controlling behavior you witnessed," a prosecutor asked. "He came to my house to drag her home. Almost every time she visited," one friend replied. Kathy Bona told the court about David's obsessive surveillance, including calling Karen repeatedly, 25 times in a 30-minute span one night. Another neighbor testified that she once found David lurking in her backyard late at night, trying to spy on the Bonas. When she confronted him, he admitted he wasn't allowed on their property and asked to use her yard to watch over there. David had also repeatedly accused Karen of infidelity and claimed she was involved in a sex ring with the Bonas, an allegation that, to most, spoke more about his jealousy than reality. "Did he ever say anything kind about her?" the prosecutor asked. "No," Kathy said. "Just that he hoped she was okay. That was all." As the trial of David Swift unfolded, the prosecution focused on what they saw as a consistent pattern of controlling and obsessive behavior. They called witnesses who testified about his temper, his frequent accusations, and his presence at moments that unnerved Karen's friends. One of those friends recalled a disturbing confrontation. "He was yelling at her. She was trying to de-escalate things. She didn't want me to feel uncomfortable. He didn't say much to me directly, just kept yelling at her." On another occasion, Karen had visited her friend Kathy Bona's home. Karen wasn't feeling well and had laid down on the bed, wrapped in a towel. Kathy testified that she was under the covers, while Karen laid on top. When David unexpectedly arrived, his demeanor again turned enraged. "He accused her of sleeping with me," Kathy said. "He was yelling about her being drunk, called her all sorts of names. It was intense." A significant portion of the prosecution's case centered on the events at Kathy's 40th birthday party, where accounts diverged. Bill Bona claimed he found Karen naked and unconscious in the living room and called David to come get her. But Karen's friend Robin offered a more troubling version of events. "I saw Karen leave the hot tub. She looked flushed, like she needed air. Not long after, I saw Mr. Bona go inside after her. When I walked in, Karen was naked on the floor, and he was standing over her, just staring. It was creepy. I immediately covered her with a towel and told them to call her husband." The prosecution alleged that David had not only lied to police but had also actively attempted to mislead the investigation. He told detectives he hadn't known Karen had a second phone, her Voyager device, but his call logs told a different story. David had called the number multiple times before she went missing. Despite claiming he went to bed around 2 a.m., digital records from his computer and phone indicated someone was awake at 3 a.m., looking at photos of Karen and her new tattoo. In the days after Karen disappeared, David visited dating websites over 250 times, viewing women's profiles while publicly playing the role of a concerned husband. A physical therapist who treated him for his injured knee testified that David was capable of supporting weight on the leg and could have dragged a body. Another neighbor testified that on October 29th, just before Karen vanished, David had helped move bales of hay weighing around 65 pounds without using crutches. The next day, though, the neighbor said, at the police station, he could barely move without them. The state also challenged the theory that Karen had left the house voluntarily. To believe that, they argued, a number of unlikely things would have to be true. She would have had to make secret arrangements to meet someone, but no evidence of such plans existed. She would have had to move both daughters from their beds, Ashley from hers, and Keely from David's, without waking anyone. And she would have done all this after taking a Benadryl, a sleep aid, with alcohol, which the medical examiner noted would have had a strong sedative effect. She took it to sleep, the prosecutor said, not to go out and meet someone at 4 in the morning. David's legal team countered that the case against him was built entirely on circumstantial evidence. His daughter Ashley, now an adult, testified that it was her mother, not her father, who moved her in the night. "I remember her moving me to my sister's room. It was just instinct. I knew it was her." The defense hammered on the absence of physical evidence. No blood, no weapon, no DNA. Even the rusty screw used to deflate the tire could not be traced back to the Swift garage. "They say he stomped her to death in the garage," the defense argued. With what? His injured leg? Or with the good one while balancing on the bad? And why is there not one drop of blood in that garage? They also pointed out that bleach found near the garage could just as easily have been pool cleaner. It was, after all, late October, when pools are often winterized with chlorine-based products. The jury listened intently as both sides presented their arguments, but when the verdict finally came in, the courtroom was stunned. David Swift was found not guilty on all major charges. First-degree murder, not guilty. Second-degree murder, not guilty. Attempted murder, not guilty. However, the jury was deadlocked on the lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter. Is there an agreement on the voluntary manslaughter count? The judge asked. No, Your Honor, the jury foreperson replied. We're hopelessly deadlocked. The prosecution had hinted during trial that this entire case might have been politically driven. With the sheriff and district attorney both up for re-election, critics suggested that Swift was being prosecuted less because of new evidence, and more because of public pressure and political timing. Still, prosecutors were not done. Despite the divided jury, they chose to retry David Swift on the unresolved voluntary manslaughter charge. David's attorney argued that the statute of limitations had expired, but on July 11, 2024, a judge ruled that the retrial could proceed. As the legal battle raged on, Karen's family remained in anguish. If I just knew for sure, who to be angry at, her mother said, maybe I could start to heal. But it's just an open wound. Every day. For 6 weeks, we didn't know where she was. And when they found her, we still didn't know who did it. Somebody took my baby and left her in the kudzu like a piece of trash. To this day, David Swift maintains his innocence. And yet, he now faces charges in Alabama as well, accused of stalking his second wife, who has since divorced him. That was the tragic and still unfolding case of Karen Swift, a mother of 4, a friend, a wife seeking a new start, and the center of one of Tennessee's most haunting unsolved crimes. With a manslaughter retrial looming and new charges in another state, the story of Karen Swift is far from over. Thank you for joining me. I'm Kevin. This is Just Thought Lounge. Stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.